Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Football Podcast. I am Ryan Wormeli, and I'm back from vacation. No more two-man shows with Bogman and Fitz. You are stuck with me in the host chair once again. Bogman, how did you enjoy the shows without me? I did listen a little.
Yeah, I don't know. There was just a weird buzz in the air. Everything felt great. It was awesome. Great connection. I don't know what is different today. I don't feel that great, but yeah, it was enjoyable.
So what you're saying is it was like seeing color for the first time. Just the birds were chirping.
More like new colors that no one has ever discovered. So something like that.
Fitz, did you at least miss me?
Yeah, Worm, and I'm sure listeners are grateful that you're back because all Bogman and I did was praise you profusely on the shows while you were out. That was it. I mean, the shows were probably getting pretty dull because it was just like saying nice things about Worm.
Oh, how much we miss Worm. When is he coming back? Yeah, everyone got really annoyed by that.
Yeah, I'm going to need to clip that for audio evidence that it's actually true. Regardless of whether or not the listeners are happy, I am back. And we are continuing the series of rankings and tiers. We're talking wide receivers today. And just a quick reminder for everyone, all of our 2024 consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. You can also navigate from there to our staff dynasty rankings. Of course, this is the Dynasty podcast, so that's probably what will interest you. We are going to go through the top half dozen or so tiers, kind of depending on how much time we have, maybe roughly the top 50-ish wide receivers, and then highlight a couple of names from beyond that top 50 as well. We're going to start at the very top with tier number 1, and it's the obvious guys. It's Justin Jefferson, it's CeeDee Lamb, it's Jamar Chase, and it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. Fitz, just before we kind of highlight any discrepancies between you two, was there any name in here that you thought A, didn't belong, or B, is missing from this tier that should be there?
I think the four who are on this tier all belong. And I actually gave a thought to whether it was too risque to possibly put Marvin Harrison Jr. ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown. But ultimately, I decided not to. We just haven't seen it yet. And the fact that I even thought about that maybe suggests that Marvin Harrison Jr. should be on that first tier. But man, I guess we should probably wait and see him make his first NFL reception before we put him on tier 1 in Dynasty.
Yeah, we'll talk about the four names actually in this tier in a second, but Bogman, I want to get your opinion on Harrison as well. I feel like if you are sitting down as an analyst and saying, here's how I rank these guys and how I'm tiering them, then it's reasonable to have Marvin Harrison in the tier below. If you're looking at just how he's being valued as a dynasty asset, his market value in trades right now across leagues, I think it is as a tier 1 dynasty wide receiver. That seems to, at least anecdotally from what I've seen, that seems to me to be how, the average fantasy manager is evaluating him and valuing him. What do you think?
I think it's fair if you want to put him in there. And I think you're right, Worm. I do think that people are valuing him that high already in certain lights. But for me, these are the four that I have in my first tier. And I have a second tier. Marvin Harrison is in that tier, of course. It only has one other guy in it. We'll get to him in a little bit. But yeah, I think that I understand the want to, but these are the four guaranteed guys. If you were worried about Amon-Ra St. Brown at all, coming off a big year in 2022, he put up better numbers in 2023 with a lot of competition too. Sam Laporta was outstanding. Jameson Williams is there. Jahmyr Gibbs is coming in. So there were more pieces around, and he was still the dominant piece. So, and he's the lowest one we have ranked here. And I think in pretty much all consensus that you see, Amon-Ra is pretty much 4. So I think this is the right group. This is what I'd go with. And Marvin Harrison is amazing, but it is really hard to put anyone with 0 reps in an NFL game in that top tier already.
This is the last question I'll have on Harrison before we get to the names who are actually in tier 1. I wasn't on the show last year, so I don't recall. Did you guys have Bijan as a tier 1 running back before he took his first snap?
Yeah.
We did.
Okay. So there is precedent for it if somebody wanted to put him there, but I get why.
I think running back, though, is an easier transition.
Yes. It's an easier transition, and the position is weaker than guys like CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson.
Absolutely.
So those are the top 3, and you guys have them in a different order. ECR has Jefferson as Dynasty wide receiver 1. Neither of you guys has him 1. You both have him 2. and you guys are flipped on whether CeeDee Lamb or Jamar Chase is 1, and then 3 on the other side. You guys have it reversed. So Fitz, kind of starting with you, why is Chase number 1 for you opposed to Jefferson or Lamb? And I recognize to a degree we're kind of splitting hairs here.
For me, it's just all about comfort with the quarterback situation, and Joe Burrow is pretty proven as one of the better pure passers in the NFL, and he was Jamar Chase's college quarterback. So there's certainly a level of comfort there. We don't know what sort of quarterback situation Justin Jefferson has. There's certainly optimism about with J.J. McCarthy, but what happens if he's the next Zach Wilson? And, the Vikings have to do another reset at quarterback. Plus, he's got a little bit of competition for targets with Jordan Addison and T.J. Hawkinson. I suppose you could say the same thing about Chase with T. Higgins, but it's just mostly about the quarterback situation for me.
Bogman, you've got CeeDee Lamb first, Chase third. Again, you guys both have Jefferson second. Why do you have Lamb first?
I mean, like you said before, Worm, we are absolutely splitting hairs here. The reason I have Lamb first is because I think Dak gets extended. I know the quarterback situation is a little in flux there. I think he gets his massive extension pretty soon. They don't have a run game going right now. They don't have a lot of competition on the roster for targets for CeeDee Lamb. So I just see a high volume of targets, him being the number 1 option on this offense moving forward. So I have him as 1.
So kind of the last wrap-up thought I want to look at this tier with, because again, it's kind of easy. We all love these guys, and you should be really happy if you have any of them, on any of your dynasty teams. In a startup, in a standard, we'll call it Superflex, 12 teams, how many of these guys are going in the first round? Is it Jefferson, Lamb, Chase? Is it actually fewer of them because there's so many quarterbacks that should go? I doubt we're taking any running backs or tight ends over these guys, but is it all 4 of them that would go in the first? What do you guys think in terms of a startup? How many should be going probably in that back half of the first round? Fitz?
In a startup Superflex, I think the top 3 all go. Jefferson, Lamb, Chase should all be going, I think. None of
in
those
the back
guys.
Half of the first?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, probably after 106.
Bogman, what do you think?
Yeah, I had them 7, 8, 9, 10. So yeah, I have them all in the first. I think after that first big group of QBs, like the top 6, in my opinion, then the wide receivers last longer than the running backs. So they got to be next up.
Let's go to tier 2. We already talked about Marvin Harrison Jr. At the top of this tier, he's wide receiver 5. You guys both agree with that. He is wide receiver 5 in ECR and for each of you. The other 3 names in this tier, Garrett Wilson, AJ Brown, and Puka Nacua. So there are some discrepancies here. The big one is Puka. Fitz, you've got him wide receiver 7. And Bogman, you've got him down at 12. So Bogman, what are you not seeing with Puka in terms of his dynasty value?
It's honestly not anything I'm not seeing with Puka. It is repeatability in this crazy number. But even with a sophomore slump, what is Puka? 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns? Like, that's with a sophomore slump based off of what he did last season with his 1,400 yards and 105 catches and 6 scores. I mean, the dude was so good. Honestly, this is where you start to see my difference in philosophy with Fitz's, where I'm willing to take Tyreek and AJ Brown still a little bit higher than a lot of other people are, because I want to win in my first 2 to 3 seasons. I want to win year 1 to start, honestly. But, even in a dynasty league, I'm looking to win quickly. So I'm taking these guys like Tyreek Hill is your number 2 wide receiver in redraft, and he gets buried in dynasty because he is 30. So I understand that, but that dude is piling up kids like nobody's business. He's going to have to play till he's 45. So I think I'm a little ready to take some of these older guys a little bit higher, and I think that's where we start to see this is in this tier.
Fitz, you are not expecting a sophomore slump from Puka because you are actually higher than consensus. You've got him at wide receiver 7.
Yeah, just he passed every eye test last year. I mean, just really good at the catch point, good after the catch, really good at running routes and getting open. So I don't think there's any question he's going to produce. Like my only worry about Puka is whether after a rookie season of good health, he starts running into the sort of injury problems that plagued him throughout his college career. So, he was not very durable at college, was very durable as a rookie last year. Hopefully that's a non-issue, but I'm not worried about him. Even if Cooper Kupp sort of has a bounce back year, like I think Puka is still going to get his.
What about Stafford, Fitzy? Are you worried about him? Because I think right now with Stafford, it's this year and then that's all that's guaranteed.
Yeah, a little bit. That might be something people have to think about. But at the same time, we don't know how much time Cooper Kupp has left, and Puka's, becomes a more attractive asset if Kupp isn't around.
And they can easily sign a veteran free agent or something. Like, it doesn't have to be going down to Stetson Bennett or whatever if Stafford is gone. So.
And a veteran free agent would want to play for Sean McVay, and
they should.
Like that. It would be an attractive landing spot. You guys are flipped on the other two names in this tier: Garrett Wilson, AJ Brown. Fitz, you have Wilson higher. Bogman, you have AJ Brown higher. There is a 3-year age difference between the two. Obviously, like Garrett Wilson, relative to the quarterback play he's dealt with, has produced at a high level, and I could see this looking like a pretty low ranking if Aaron Rodgers is healthy and Wilson has that big year. But on the other hand, Rodgers is old. So even if there is a big year here, there's still a question mark at quarterback. So I get that. I think I would tend to lean Wilson personally of the two, but it's obviously close. So Bogman, you go the other way. You have AJ Brown ahead of Garrett Wilson, 7 versus 9. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, because AJ Brown is still a stud. He's 26. People want to act like he's 30. No, he just put up back-to-back 1,400-yard seasons. He has 18 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. I know he didn't perform well in the back half of last season, but the Eagles didn't perform well in the back half of last season. I think this is one of the most talented wide receivers I've seen. I think he gets overlooked a little bit, and he's still in the prime of his career. So I am not lowering him because of a back half of one season. Garrett Wilson is awesome. I feel like I'm not low on Garrett Wilson at all. I have him as a wide receiver 1, even though he has a cloudy future after Aaron Rodgers. But I love him. There's not a ton of target competition for him. I think Breece is still number 1 in that offense, of course, but Garrett Wilson is easily the number 1 receiving option. I think he's amazing, and I'm really high on him, and I was really high on him coming out of Ohio State, but I just can't put too many guys above AJ Brown.
Yeah, Garrett Wilson. Well, first of all, AJ Brown is going to turn 27 in 10 days, so he's really 27. But
let's call him 27. That's fine.
Yes, your point still stands. Just to say it. Garrett Wilson and Fitz. I don't know if this is part of your calculation. He's younger than everybody ranked ahead of him, except for Marvin Harrison Jr.
Wow. Yeah. It does help that he's young, and for me, the gap in rankings, dynasty rankings between Garrett Wilson and AJ Brown, purely age. In my redraft rankings, I have them back to back.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Let's go to tier 3. This is a larger tier here. The first 2 tiers are just 4 players each. This is going to go from wide receiver 9 through wide receiver 17. The names quickly: Malik Nabers, Tyreek Hill, Chris Olave, Brandon Aiyuk, Drake London, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, Michael Pittman, and Rome Odunze. Now, there are multiple discrepancies here that we'll dive into. The first one I want to highlight is actually the last name I said. That's Rome Odunze. Now, you guys are not having a discrepancy against each other. You just disagree with ECR, which maybe hasn't totally caught up from the draft. I mean, I think for the most part it has, but it's down at 17, and you guys both have him as top 10 wide receivers in your respective rankings. So Fitz, Rome Odunze, top 10 receiver. I agree with it.
I just don't think there should be a lot of separation between Harrison, Nabers, and Odunze in overall dynasty rankings. Like, Harrison is my favorite, and I personally think he is the best prospect of those 3, but Odunze is one heck of a prospect. Like, most years, he is your number 1 receiver. And to me, the ECR of wide receiver 17 is just way too low.
Yeah, I'm really frustrated I don't have Odunze in more leagues because I do have a startup upcoming soon where I'm going to hope to get him, but I just wasn't able to get him in any of my rookie drafts. And I get that there's some hesitancy in redraft given the crowded wide receiver room in Chicago, but pairing a guy with this talent with Caleb Williams and knowing the age of Keenan Allen, like I think 17 is like disrespectfully too low. Bogman?
I thought I was low at 10, to be honest with you, when I was making my rankings. I thought, I'm at 10. I think I'm going to be a little bit lower than ECR on Rome. And then, obviously doing this, I see 17. wow. I mean, I have him firmly as a wide receiver 1. This dude is getting Larry Fitzgerald comps from some of the best evaluators in talent. So maybe you don't think he's Larry Fitzgerald, but to me, he's a wide receiver 1 for sure. That's why I have him ahead of a guy like Puka, who just had the best rookie season ever. I think all 3 of these guys coming in, I think Fitz was right when he said, I don't think the difference between Nabers and Harrison and Odunze should be that big of a gap that it is in ECR. So
it's silly to have him behind Michael Pittman, who I believe has scored like 15 touchdowns in 62 career games. And really,
I love Pittman, but that's not close to me.
To me, the only names in this tier that I'm comfortable having ahead of Odunze are Nabers for obvious reasons. He's also an elite prospect who's younger and all that. Tyreek Hill, and that's strictly if you're kind of in win now mode, like Bogman described. If you're not, obviously, I'd still kind of lean Odunze. And then Drake London, who neither of you guys have ahead of him. I wouldn't have ahead of him, but I could see the argument for, given the talent and the idea that he now has a quarterback upgrade. I could at least buy that argument. I don't really buy the argument for anybody else being in this tier, being ahead of Odunze. I just think it's so clear that he's undervalued here in ECR right now. Let's talk about Drake London, because that is one where Fitz, you're roughly in line with consensus. You've got him 1 spot ahead at wide receiver 12. He's wide receiver 13 in consensus. But Bogman, you've got him down at wide receiver 20. So you are lower on London.
Yeah, I'm a little lower on London. I maybe I need to bump him up, but I have him like in my rankings. I have him in the range of like Metcalf and Pittman and T. Higgins. Like, I think he's that type of wide receiver who's going to have a ton. I think maybe we are over projecting him because he's been such a disappointment, and we are so mad at Arthur Smith, as we should be, for the lack of usage for this guy. So maybe I'm underrating him a little bit. Maybe I'm having buyer's remorse from a couple of seasons of seeing this underperforming Drake London, because he is super talented. But I think him and Pittman are pretty close. So I'm going to have them ranked pretty close. And I'm a little bit lower on London for sure here. I didn't feel like I was high on Rome, and I didn't feel like I was low on London, and I was. So I'm comfortable with my ranking. There's just a lot of good wide receivers here. That's why this tier is a little bit bigger than the other ones.
Fitz, you are, like I said, more in line with consensus on London. Are you just buying into the kind of the same narrative that everybody's talking about? Finally get the quarterback upgrade, play caller upgrade. We know he's talented. He's still young, all that.
Yes, all of those things, and especially the quarterback upgrade. And now there's like a buffer in case Kirk Cousins got hurt. We've got Penix behind him, so that's a good thing. The other thing I think is like it's going to help having another credible wide receiver there. Like last year, the second best receiver on the Falcons was Mac Hollins. Darnell Mooney is actually really good. So plus with Kyle Pitts, hopefully fully healthy and ready to break out, like teams aren't going to be able to like automatically stick their best cornerback on Drake London or like roll safety help over his way.
It's really like a perfect setup for a receiver in terms of the supporting cast, because Mooney is a talented player, but he's not so good that he's going to demand targets away from Drake London. And the only other options are a running back and a tight end, and not to knock the talent of those guys, obviously, but it's just they're going to be used in different ways. So
here's one thing, Worm, on Drake London and specifically the Falcons offense is the one thing that I think Arthur Smith did do that we can give him credit for is he upgraded this offensive line immensely. And in doing that, he said, well, this line cannot pass block. We're going to run the ball a ton. And so he went out and he got Bijan and he got Tyler Algier, and they ran behind this line. I think if you switch to a high volume passing offense quickly, there may be issues with this offensive line to start, because they had issues protecting before we saw Arthur Smith come in. A terrible quarterback. So, and they ranked really high in pass blocking last season, according to PFF. Arthur Smith did put them in a good position because everyone was looking run because they ran the ball so much. So I do question a little bit of, holding up, and you got Cousins coming off an Achilles. Penix is a rookie. I'm a right now guy, and I still have a couple questions about this offense, even though we expect it to be way better with Arthur Smith out of town.
The guy in this tier that I think, outside of Tyreek, which is mostly philosophical, you're a right now guy, which is why you'd have him maybe a tier up. Fitz, obviously, it's clearly only the age that has you having him down in this range. So I don't even think we need to spend time on that. The guy that I think has a case for maybe being in tier 2 is Malik Nabers. And I know he hasn't done it yet, but we have Marvin Harrison Jr. up there. And there are a lot of, scouts and kind of the advanced numbers guys who are saying that Nabers is every bit the prospect Marvin Harrison Jr. is. And he didn't have quite as long a college career of this uber production like we saw from Harrison, who did it as both a sophomore and a junior. But Nabers is younger. Nabers was sensational last year. And I know he gets paired with the worst quarterback than Harrison does. I'm not saying he should be equally ranked as Marvin Harrison. I wouldn't consider Nabers in tier 1 like I might Marvin Harrison Jr. But I think maybe Harrison at the top of tier 2 with Nabers at the bottom of tier 2 would make more sense to me than Nabers at the top of tier 3. What do you think about that, Fitz?
Completely agree. I think Nabers should be in tier 2. And, like the early buzz in OTAs was very positive. Like he was getting rave reviews, and rightly so. Like, we knew coming out of college, this guy's a terrific wide receiver prospect, and he should be able to hit the ground running for the Giants, even though, Daniel Jones, maybe not the most optimal quarterback situation for him in year 1.
Bogman, I know I don't need to convince you because you have Nabers ranked higher even than Fitz does. You have him up at wide receiver 6 behind only tier 1 and Harrison.
When I break my tiers up, it's the top 4 guys and then Harrison and Nabers as tier 2. That is tier 2 to me because they represent such a high floor in terms of talent and all of the crazy upside that you have from top tier prospects. So for me, that's the tier. And I was watching, I can't remember what it was. I'm sorry, I can't give credit, but I was watching someone the other day and they did a blind play with Daniel Jones and another quarterback with insanely similar numbers. And it was Trevor Lawrence. So I know we don't like Daniel Jones, right? But I think there's more talent in there. The Giants have done a terrible job of putting talent around him and making this a successful offense for him to run. So maybe we see that now that this is easily the most talented player, wide receiver, that Daniel Jones has played with. Barkley was great, but didn't help him out a lot. So I think Malik could be a huge.
And he's going to get all the targets.
Resurrect his career.
He's going to get every target this season.
Who else is going to get targeted? Yeah. Darius Slayton. I mean, Jalen Hyatt, Daniel Bellinger. Waller's gone. He's off auto tuning stuff. So
and I know like with guys like Harrison and Nabers and Odunze, and they've never played a snap, so it feels riskier. But when was the last receiver drafted this high with this much prospect pedigree that didn't pan out for a reason other than injury? Because I mean, you could point to like first round picks that have not panned out, like the Jalen Reagors and the Kadarius Tonys of the world. But those are guys that are drafted like 20th. Guys that are drafted top 6 who are being talked about as the best receiver in the class, one of the best receivers in who's was going toe to toe with one of the best receiver prospects in several years. I mean, you said it, Bogman. The floor is very high considering he's a rookie.
I mean, the hit rate has been pretty high on those high-end wide receivers since Al Davis quit taking them. You know what I mean?
Who was the guy the Lions took, Boggs, way back?
Charles Rogers.
Wait, Rogers? Was that the last name?
Wasn't it Charles Rogers?
I want to say, yeah. I mean, maybe that's right. It was Charles something. I'm blanking on the last name, but I want to say that was like top 6, and he did not pan out. That's the only one I can think of.
I was going to say, like, sorry to say it, but like Darius Hayward Bay as a Maryland guy went top 10, but that was an Al Davis.
That's the guy. That was Al Davis, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So
great special teamer. He played for the Steelers forever on special teams.
I loved him in Maryland, but that like it's been a while is my point of a guy with like who goes this high, who doesn't work out. Last one in this tier where there's really a discrepancy, at least one that I want to highlight, is Brandon Aiyuk. And you guys are both in agreement that he's wide receiver 16. He's wide receiver 12 in ECR. So you guys are both lower. And we've talked a bit about him on past shows, but it's sort of the catch-22 of like, well, on the one hand, he's playing in this amazing offense that, really utilizes his skill set, but the volume isn't totally always there, so he could get traded, but then maybe he's with the worst play caller, maybe a worse quarterback situation. So I kind of go back and forth on whether or not I even want him to be the guy that San Francisco keeps or not. I I think I do want him to stay there, but you could make a compelling case either way, I guess is my ultimate point. But you guys, like I said, both have him lower than ECR. So Fitz, Brandon Aiyuk, still see him as a wide receiver 2, but not quite a wide receiver 1 in Dynasty.
Yes. And by the way, Justin Blackman, one other fairly early first round pick who didn't pan out. I want to say he was top 10, maybe he went 12 or whatever, but
what was that, like 2014 or so? I mean, it was a while ago.
Good at Oklahoma State. I know. I was so sure he was going to be a big hit in the NFL. Did not work out.
So Aiyuk, just barely.
He was 2012, by the way. Sorry to cut you off.
2012. Oh my,
12 years ago.
Only 12 years ago. No big deal.
Yeah.
So Aiyuk, fantastic talent, all around. Like, I don't think there's any question about how good he is. He even is like excellent as a blocker. He does everything well. He is a terrific all around receiver, but as of now, he is pretty squeezed for targets. He had barely over 100 targets last year and had to just max out his efficiency to put up the sort of numbers he did, which is why I think he's being insanely overvalued in redraft. I have less of an issue with him being ECR 12 in Dynasty, although I do think that's a little bit rich too.
Bogman, what do you think?
There's just too much gray in his future to know where he's going to end up, what his role is going to be. Are the Niners going to keep adding targets if he stays there? Pearsall's coming in, and maybe Kittle's on his way out, but CMC's still number 1. Debo's still there. I don't know, man. Like, I just can't take Aiyuk as a wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. There's too much gray that I don't know about his future. So give me him as a high-end wide receiver 2.
Quick note on one of Fantasy Pros' great draft tools. Create the perfect rankings for your league with the Cheat Sheet Creator. Add tiers and sync your league to create custom rankings based on your league settings. You can visit fantasypros.com/draftwizard or use the Cheat Sheet Creator on our Fantasy Football Draft Wizard app to dominate your draft. All right, let's get to tier 4. This runs from wide receiver 18 through wide receiver 25, and it goes DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, Nico Collins, T. Higgins, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, Tank Dell, and George Pickens. Once again, a lot of names here. It gets easier to kind of have discrepancies the further you get because it's less obvious than it is at the top. So the first one that I want to highlight is Nico Collins, and I really want to highlight him because I also want to highlight Tank Dell and really just this receiving core in general. In redraft, it's tricky enough with Stephon Diggs mixed in there, but even in Dynasty, I don't think it's entirely obvious who you should be preferring between Collins and Dell. I mean, I think it's very likely that Collins will go higher in startup drafts and be more highly valued in trades, but CJ Stroud loves Tank Dell, and he was really good and at times outperformed Nico Collins when they were both in the field last season. So, I mean, they're both really exciting and receivers I would love to have. How are you, Bogman, parsing between the two in Dynasty?
This one is actually one of the easier ones for me. It's Nico. I think Nico is a target. He's a target hog. He's the younger between him and Diggs. So if we're looking for the number 1 for a long term, it's going to be Nico. I think Diggs is kind of a, hey, look, we were so good last year. Let's add another piece, see if we can take the next step, go to the AFC Championship, hopefully go to the Super Bowl by adding some talent here. Tank Dell is undersized. He overperformed last year and he got hurt. So I think in Dynasty, this one is kind of simple to me. Take the guy with the size. That's the target hog. They're both young and working on a big rapport, but they brought in Stephon Diggs. I think Diggs takes away from Dell more than he takes away from Collins to start. So for me, it's easy Nico Collins between those guys.
Fitz, you've also got Nico higher in your rankings, but the gap is closer than Bogman has it.
Yeah. So, I mean, in addition to being an obvious ageist in Dynasty, as Boggs will certainly attest, I'm a bit of a sizeist too. So I do agree with Boggs there that like the bigger guy is more attractive to me. And Nico plays that bully ball style I just love. Like, he is a physical mismatch for the smaller cornerbacks who try to handle him and is just an absolute beast after the catch. Really appreciate that about his game. But we shouldn't overlook the fact that basically when he and Dell were both healthy early last season, Dell was sort of outproducing Nico Collins. Like, not by much, but I think Dell was the more prolific fantasy scorer early last year until he got hurt. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, I want to like both of these guys even more than the rankings suggest, and I think they both have bright long-term futures. Like Dell's secret sauce is getting open. Like he is guarding him is like trying to guard Mercury. Like he is Quicksilver out there. Like you cannot lay a hand on that guy, and like we were hearing that about him when he was at the Senior Bowl, but it's just such a crowded picture right now. It's hard to get any of these guys higher than, in the 20s for Dynasty.
I think the hardest thing for me to ignore, and it's not that Dell outplayed him at times, it's none of that. It's that Stroud, who is the most important person in this organization, so clearly loves Dell. Like that has been his guy. He told Houston to draft him. He included him when he was doing one of those videos with, I think it was against Micah Parsons, like who was your perfect offense of all time from like this century or whatever. And he had Tank Dell on the field along with Calvin Johnson and Larry Fitzgerald and whoever else. Like he loves Tank Dell. And like that's really hard for me to ignore when I'm thinking long term, a guy who's paired with the quarterback, who is this elite young quarterback, and again, the most important person in the organization. Looking at some of these other guys in tier 4, Zay Flowers is somebody that you guys disagree on. Fitz is exactly in line with consensus. He has a wide receiver 22. Bob, when you got him down at 32, I assume this is just because you hate the Ravens?
No, it's not. It is. That's a big part of it, of course. But no, the thing with Zay for me, and I really like Zay, but this is a run first offense. I don't think it's going to change for a while. I mean, even when they start to pare down Lamar running, they're still going to run the ball with the running backs a lot, right? So Mark Andrews is still there. I think Zay is a great talent, but I don't think he's the type of talent to where if you have Zay, you would pass on a Harrison or Nabers or a top end wide receiver if you were in position to draft one if you're Baltimore. So I just think there's a lot of contributing factors adding up to me. And really what it is it's just I have him as a wide receiver 3. He's a low end wide receiver 2 right now. I have him as a middle to low end wide receiver 3. So I'm just a couple spots on. It just means I won't have many shares of him in startups, but I drafted him his rookie year, so I do have a lot of shares of Zay. For me, he's lost a little bit of luster. Still very, very good wide receiver though, but it's just so deep at wideout that I just can't get him as a wide receiver 2. Can't do it.
Fitz, like I said, it's not like you're high on Flowers. You just got him directly in line with consensus.
Yeah, I just like it. Maybe a very slightly disappointing rookie season. Although Worm, I think we were just reminiscing about the long, 75-yard catch and run touchdown that was called back by a horrible non-holding holding call against the Ravens.
I had it
in
as
the
a
season.
Hold. Yeah, I had it as a hold.
So, I mean, I think he's good. And yes, the Ravens are a little run heavy, but Zay's clearly going to have a long and fruitful career, I think.
Another guys that you guys are a little bit apart on is T. Higgins. Bogman, you've got him wide receiver 19. Fitz, you've got him wide receiver 24. So Bogman, I'll start with you. More optimistic about Higgins, even considering the kind of uncertainty surrounding where he might be playing next year?
Yeah, I think Higgins is one of those guys that you just can't. I think wherever he ends up is going to be better for him because Jamar Chase isn't going to be on that team. And I think T. Higgins is talented enough to be a wide receiver 1 and an alpha for a lot of teams. I think we would view him as Nico Collins. And by the way, I think he's 2 months older than Nico Collins, right? So this guy has 4 years of experience. He's already on the franchise tag. He came in the league, I believe, when he was 8 years old. So, he's been around for a while. He's still super young. He's coming up on a big contract. He's in a contract year. I know a lot of people are afraid of that. I'm just not. I think T. Higgins is incredibly talented. I think wherever he goes, he's going to still be a number 1. Even if it's signing a deal with Cincinnati, it's still a good spot because they're so pass heavy. So, but for me, I am, I'm a big fan of T. Higgins, so I think he's going to be a number 1 regardless of where he goes.
What do you think, Fitz?
I'm not as sure as Bogman is. I don't know if he could be Al Pacino if he was asked to be. Maybe he's just a Brian Dennehy, where he is destined to be like a supporting player. So yeah, I'm a little concerned about all the hamstring issues he had last year. I like him. I don't know. Top 24 seems right to me. I can't quite put him in the top 20. I don't know if he's ever going to be like a 1,300, 1,400 yard guy.
Couple more names I want to highlight in this tier because I think it's a really interesting tier. Bogman, you are wide receiver 13 for DJ Moore. He is at the top of this tier, but you've got him 5 spots higher than where he is at wide receiver 18. So you've got 2 Bears receivers in the top 13 in your dynasty rankings.
Yeah, and this is, just you look at the direction of this offense, right? They added Rome. They traded for Keenan. A couple years ago, they traded for DJ Moore now. So I think when you have a guy like Caleb Williams and you don't have that Derrick Henry, that's Bijan Robinson, that's Saquon Barkley, that's CMC, that guy that's going to take 30 carries, right? You don't have that in the backfield. You're going to depend on Caleb Williams. This offense is going to run through him. I think DJ Moore is going to be a big part of it. And I don't know that there is a safer floor wide receiver than DJ Moore. We've seen him perform with garbage QBs for his entire career. So now that he has a good QB, I think the ceiling is probably higher than we're giving it credit for. But we know the floor is high. So I think there's just a lot in there to already love about DJ Moore, and he's just so safe. So he's my first wide receiver too, yes.
It's another guy you're in line with consensus on, Fitz.
He's so good. I admire Bogman for having the guts to rank him 13th overall. But I just see immediate, target competition this year. Maybe by the time Caleb Williams gets to the height of his powers, DJ Moore is going to be pushing 30. So age kind of factors into it. I mean, I'm trying to be respectful with the wide receiver 17 ranking because I do think DJ Moore is terrific, like one of the 10 most talented receivers in the league. But just with some of the headwinds he's facing and the fact that he's pretty squarely in the prime of his career and is going to be maybe in the late prime of his career in a year or two, that pushes him just outside wide receiver 1 territory for me.
The last guy in this tier and the last guy I want to talk about in this tier is George Pickens. Fitz, once again, you're in line with consensus. Bogman is the guy who's way low, despite the fact that he's a Steeler. You got a wide receiver 35, which is 10 spots lower than consensus. Is it a talent thing? Is it a quarterback thing? Is it the other people on the team?
I hate Arthur Smith.
Arthur Smith. Okay.
I hate the way this offense runs. I like George Pickens a ton. I hope Arthur Smith isn't long for this offense, but he goes to one guy. I think it's going to be Pickens, but if it's not, then that guy gets dusted completely out of the entire rotation. So maybe it's Roman. Maybe Roman is going to end up being the guy. But this is a run-first offense. They've dedicated money towards running the ball. I do think Pickens is still a 1,000-yard guy with the potential for 10 touchdowns, but there's just a lot of floor there for Pickens, who's a volatile person, regardless of what type of player he is, too. So if he's not getting the volume he wants, is he going to cry? The Steelers don't tend to deal with that. They trade you off to somewhere terrible like Carolina. So I don't know. I just don't like a lot of what I see in the future for George Pickens under Arthur Smith. Hopefully he changes his tune. That would be my favorite thing and passes the ball a little bit more. But the way they're building this offense, it's going to be, do you fit in Arthur Smith's system? And if you don't, you're going to be out pretty quick.
By now, most of you have probably heard of Reality Sports Online, the powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it? It's time to go see what all the buzz in the Dynasty community is about: free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract and salary cap functionality, and much, much more. Think it sounds complicated? It's not. The best thing about Reality Sports Online Fantasy Front Office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league. It just requires more strategy. Think you're among the fantasy elite? Well, this is the platform to test your mettle. Still not sure? You can test out your general manager skills for free in a mock free agency auction. If you like what you see, use promo code FANTASYPROS to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. That's promo code FANTASYPROS to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. Let's go to tier 5, the biggest one yet, so we're definitely not going to hit on every name, but just to read through them, it runs from wide receiver 26 through wide receiver 42. The names are Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Deebo Samuel, Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, Devontae Adams, Jaden Reed, Ladd McConkey, Stephon Diggs, Brian Thomas, Mike Evans, Christian Kirk, Cooper Kupp, Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin, Keon Coleman, Deontay Johnson, and Chris Godwin. Take a big breath. Yeah.
Take a breath, Worm. Good Lord. That's a lot of names there.
Coming off the read, too, back to back. That was...
That's how you know he's a pro.
But yeah, you're glad I was back for the host chair for that one. So you didn't have to do it.
Yes.
But yeah, there's obviously like a ton of names here and there's a bunch of different directions you could go. Is there one name, Fitz, I'll start with you, that stands out just as I think this guy is ranked too high or too low?
Is there one that stands out?
Who's too low here? Come on, Fitz.
Yeah,
we're both high on him.
We both like Keon Coleman a lot more than consensus.
That's it.
Yeah, like this guy, his contested catch ability is pretty special, like George Pickens type special. So like it's considering that he also has a much more effervescent personality than George Pickens, who has more of a mercurial personality. So yeah, like Coleman could potentially be a star. I don't want to get like too overboard. I mean, Bogman, your wide receiver 24 ranking for Coleman. I wish I had the guts to do that. I'm not quite there. I'm at wide receiver 32, still 8 above ECR, but I like him a lot. And, wide receiver 40. I know ECR tends to be a little bit, some people don't quite get on board with the rookies as early as they should. So like all the ECRs for rookies are a little too low, except for maybe the very tippy top rookies. But man, wide receiver 40 seems egregiously low for Keon Coleman.
Bogman, you've got him up at wide receiver 24. Fitz already said it. What's the case?
Way too low for Keon Coleman. I mean, this is a pass-first offense with Josh Allen at the helm that just dropped Stephon Diggs. I mean, yes, I expect Dalton Kincaid to take a big jump. Sure, they're going to run the ball a lot. They added Ray Davis, right? And you have James Cook. That's a nice 1-2 punch. Fitz and I both are fans of Khalil Shakir. We expect him to take a step up. But most of those targets, I think, are going to Coleman. This is why they drafted him, to replace Stephon Diggs. Diggs is obviously an issue personnel-wise there. So they got rid of him. They brought in Coleman. And Fitz and I have watched Coleman at FSU. We know maybe he didn't have the best 40 time ever, but in that gauntlet drill with the ball in his hands, running his routes, he was faster than all of those guys. At his size, he returned kicks and punts. I really am a big Keon Coleman fan. I think he's going to be great. I think this is a guy I ranked at 24, and I went, maybe I'm low when I did it without looking at consensus.
I do understand the trepidation, though. He never had an 800-yard college season. Not super fast, not a great separator, but like that contested catch ability. Like I think he can be, Des Bryant, who was not a great separator either, but was like a prolific wide receiver. And I think Keon Coleman has that sort of game.
There are a number of veterans here, Bogman, that you're higher on. I assume these are all just because you kind of are playing for a shorter win now window. Guys like Cooper Kupp, you're higher than consensus on. Mike Evans, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams. Is that pretty much true for all those guys?
It is, but there are some young guys that I'm higher on too, like Ladd and Brian Thomas and Keon Coleman and Xavier. Fitz and I are both very, very high on Xavier Worthy.
All rookies, yeah, that you just mentioned.
Right. So I am like, I do understand playing for upside, and in my tiers, the way that I do it, I like to give you I kept talking about last week. My tiers were bigger than what we had in ECR and what we have in consensus. And I'm kind of trying to build it so you can go the way you want by looking at my tiers. You can take, a win now guy. You can take, a younger guy if you're going that range. I just don't want to be stuck in the middle. So yeah, I am high on like guys like Mike Evans and Devontae, just a little bit more than consensus, but the young guys too. I'm high on Ladd, high on Worthy. So yeah, I understand both sides of it, but yeah, it is a thing. It is just a philosophy thing for me and these old guys. I'm not an ageist like Fitz is. So
yeah. Well, Fitz, pretty much everybody that we just named, you are either with consensus or lower than consensus on. The one exception is Xavier Worthy. You got him wide receiver 23. That's exactly the same as Bogman. It's 6 spots higher than he is in the expert consensus rankings. So that is one guy that you are excited about.
Yeah, I am. I love his route running ability. I think that paired with Patrick Mahomes is just going to be magic. And I know some people are worried about target competition. Yeah, and like that's a legitimate concern, but we'll see. Like Travis Kelce isn't going to be around forever. Maybe this is his swan song. Who knows how long Hollywood Brown lasts in Kansas City. So I just love the idea of Xavier Worthy being paired for like the entirety of his rookie deal with like vintage Patrick Mahomes.
I thought that, and I agree with you on Worthy. I thought that the other rookies, Ladd McConkey and Brian Thomas, I'm more aligned with Bogman on those. He's got them 25 and 26. Whereas Fitz, you've got them 33 and 34. I'm really excited about both of them. Ladd obviously paired with Justin Herbert. There's not a lot of target competition there. We think he's a talented guy. Brian Thomas was consensus wide receiver 4 coming into this class, and he went in the first round. And I'm not out on Trevor Lawrence, and I think there's targets to be had there. There's more mouths to feed in Jacksonville, but they also did lose Calvin Ridley. Like, I think if Brian Thomas proves himself to be a very, very good receiver, he will get. There are targets to be had if he proves himself worthy of them. So I really like both those guys as kind of high-end wide receiver 3s rather than mid or late wide receiver 3s. Fitz, why are you a little lower on them?
Fair way to look at it. I've got Coleman, McConkey, and Thomas all ranked consecutively wide receiver 32 through wide receiver 34. Just not knowing for sure what they're going to be. And that's basically it. And like, I do not want to get out over my skis in a trade to try to acquire these guys when, they weren't in that safe zone that we were talking about earlier, where the bust rate is extremely low in that top 10, top 12 of the first round. These guys were slightly later picks. And while they were slightly later picks in a wide receiver rich draft, I still don't want to project stardom for guys who were either late first round or early second round picks.
Last guy before we move off this tier, it's the guy at the top of the tier, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, wide receiver 26. Fitz, you've got him wide receiver 27. Bogman, you've got him wide receiver 34. This is somebody I was very excited about a year ago, and we kind of expected when he was drafted that, okay, this might be a year one where he doesn't get all of the targets that we were hoping for because of the offense he's in. He's still in that offense, but I mean, I certainly haven't given up on the talent. So he's somebody that I'm certainly willing to take a swing on if the price is right in startup drafts. What do you think about JSN, Bogman?
Yeah, I think JSN in terms of talent is very, very good. The issue that I have with this entire Seattle offense really is, what is this quarterback going? Who is the quarterback moving forward? They traded for Sam Howell. They seem to really like him. We saw him under pressure last year get sacked way too many times. He held on the ball too much. Geno took a big step back after his resurgent year. Dave Canales left when he helped out Baker Mayfield, and Geno took a little bit of a hit. So, and I know our boy Pisa Pia is worried about Baker taking that hit. Now that Canales is going to Carolina to help Bryce Young potentially. So it's the quarterback situation. It's the fact that McDonald comes over from a run-heavy offense, and that's what you want to do from the defensive perspective. You want to run the ball with guys like Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, who are really good. You already have an alpha here in DK Metcalf, who has scored a ton of touchdowns in his career so far. And he got pushed off by Jake Bobo in some sets last season. So I love JSN. I think the talent is there. I think Grubb is going to use him much better than they did last season. Lockett is not long for the roster either, but I do see some concerns moving forward. And there's so many good wide receivers to pick from. I don't have a lot of confidence moving forward.
Fitz, do you consider yourself to be in or out on JSN right now in Dynasty?
In. Hated the way Shane Waldron used him last year with like most of his routes coming within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. Weird usage. I think things will be better this year with Ryan Grubb. And before we get off this tier, Worm, can I just make one more comment about a different player? Just to show what an ageist I am in Dynasty. I am 6 spots behind ECR on Devontae Adams in Dynasty. I think in redraft this year, I'm like 5 spots ahead of ECR on Devontae Adams. And believe me, the irony of the old guy on the show being the ageist guy on the show is not lost on me at all.
That's the most experienced guy on
there
the
you
show.
go. Thank you.
You're lucky that Bogman and I aren't ageist.
Well, really, that Worm is an ageist. I think I might be closer to Fitz than I am Worm. I don't know.
I won't ask you your age publicly. Let's go to tier 6. This runs from wide receiver 43 through wide receiver 54. Christian Watson, Calvin Ridley, Ricky Pearsall, Keenan Allen, Marquise Brown, Xavier Leggett, Jameson Williams, Adonai Mitchell, Josh Downs, Cortland Sutton, DeAndre Hopkins, and Jahan Dotson. There's a few names here with pretty wide gaps between your guys' rankings. The first one, Ricky Pearsall. Fitz, you have him wide receiver 38. Bogman down at wide receiver 52. This is obviously another rookie. This is somebody whose situation will play a big role, long-term in terms of what happens with the other receivers in San Francisco. But Fitz, you're the high man on him at wide receiver 38.
Yeah, barring injury or a trade, 2024 is probably going to be a washout for him. Like, there just aren't targets in this offense for Ricky Pearsall yet. But really interesting prospect. Like, man, I mean, I think he's in some ways like sort of a Ladd McConkey knockoff. Really good at getting open, really athletic. I like him a lot. I just think, play the long runway with him because it's probably not going to happen for him in 2024.
Bogman, you are on the other side on this one.
Yeah, there's too many buts, for Pearsall for me. He's like in terms of skill, I think he's really good. I really would have loved, put Ricky Pearsall at Buffalo, man. I would have loved to have seen that. I might have him up where I have Coleman, probably a little bit behind that. But he ended up in San Francisco. We hope Aiyuk gets moved for his 2024. But if he doesn't, I don't know that he's seeing much at all this year. It'd have to be injuries, which, it's the NFL, so it happens. But then if he doesn't see a lot of action this year, and then he does next year, is there a learning curve next year? Now you're getting into year 3 where that could be his real big breakout year. And I'm looking in the 3-year window. So I'm just going to be a little bit lower. I'm going to let somebody else grab and stash Pearsall.
Quickly, Bogman, the next guy on the list, Keenan Allen. You are also the high man on him. We've already talked a bit about the Bears, but he's the third Bears receiver that you are higher on than consensus.
Yeah, I still have him as a wide receiver 4, though. So, I like this year could be huge for him, but this is a player that you do not take with the expectation to last you longer than a season. So, take him this year, hope that he stays healthy like he has, and then, nothing else is guaranteed beyond this. So I understand that, even though I am higher on him.
Fitz, you are a couple of spots higher than consensus on Hollywood Brown. Bogman is actually way lower on Hollywood Brown. So like I said, Fitz, you're only a couple spots higher, but what do you like about Hollywood in Dynasty?
Well, the one thing I really like about Hollywood Brown is that he's going to be paired with Patrick Mahomes in 2024. And I know we have not seen great efficiency from Hollywood, but we have seen some really high highs for him. It seems like early in the season, he's terrific. Then he sustains some sort of injury and the rest of the year just doesn't go well for him. So, hopefully his health cooperates because I'm excited by the Mahomes Hollywood pairing. I think that could be pretty fun. And, he's the kind of guy who can be a really valuable fantasy asset without a bunch of targets. Because he is such a dangerous home run hitter. He can do a lot of damage on just maybe 100 targets a season. So I'm looking forward to see what he can do in Kansas City.
Bogman, you have Hollywood Brown at wide receiver 62. That's lower than everybody else in this tier. So
I'm probably lower than anyone on Marquise Brown. And honestly, what it was James Conner's most recent comments. I don't know if you guys saw these about the roster change. He said, we cleansed the roster. Guys who weren't serious about football, guys who were not in it for the right reasons, guys who didn't put the team first. We were slowly weeding that stuff out. That's what it takes. We cleanse, and now we're ready to attack. I mean, that is pretty obviously talking about a guy like Marquise Brown, who they got rid of, who I have stuck up for a long time, even though he went to Oklahoma. This dude at Oklahoma snapped off these crazy routes. He was so good. I loved watching him so much. I think he doesn't really care about football. I think he's in it for the paycheck. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully it proves everybody else. I am done sticking my neck out for stupid Marquise Brown. I will not do it anymore. No way.
One player that I want to ask about in this tier, who you guys are roughly in line with consensus on, both of you, it's Jameson Williams. You're each 2 to 3 spots higher than ECR on him, but roughly the same. He's somebody that has gotten some buzz this offseason. You know, Dan Campbell has had comments about how he's done everything right this offseason and how great he looks. Obviously, he has the draft pedigree. We know what the skill set was at Alabama. We know he's dealt with injuries, theoretically healthier now. It's obviously a really strong offense with outside of Amon-Ra. There is plenty of room in this offense for a second wide receiver. So is he somebody that you think could maybe jump up a tier or multiple tiers by this time next year if things go right, Fitz?
Definitely. As a guy who was picked in the top half of the first round and was just spectacular in his the end of his career at Alabama in college. Yeah, I mean, like, obviously he kind of gets a mulligan for his first year, where he was coming off the major injury. The Lions treated him with kid gloves and barely played him at all. And then last year he had some injury issues, plus a lot of target competition. But now you look at the competition he has, at least for targets on the outside, and it's Khalif Raymond and Donovan Peoples-Jones. Like, there is not much there for him to be like the designated lid lifter on the outside in this offense. And like, that could be a pretty profitable role. Again, like Hollywood Brown, a guy who isn't going to need 140 targets to pay off in fantasy. He could get 100 targets. And as long as there are some splash plays, which this guy certainly has the speed to provide, he could be a nice dynasty asset.
Bogman, what are your thoughts on Jameson?
This is one of the few guys that I moved up. I had the overcorrection. You guys remember I was way too high on him last season. I thought those targets that went to Sam Laporta last year were going to go to Jameson, right? So I was way too high on him. I had him too low on the overcorrection this offseason. And I do still like Jameson a lot. But I will say, I think his upside is capped. I know he's getting a ton of buzz here. And Dan Campbell is like the most accurate to what he says comes true on the field. I'm starting to think like your boy McDonald for Seattle now, Wormeli. I'm starting to think he might be like a Pollyanna Pete, like Pete Carroll, who everyone had talked about is amazing, best player I've ever seen. Like that's what Pete Carroll did. I'm starting to get that. Campbell will level with you. And he'll be like, hey, this guy needs to do X, Y, or Z to make the team. That kind of attitude. And he says Jameson Williams is going to be the next big thing this year. So you love to hear it. But even if he does take a big step up, you're still behind Amon-Ra. You're behind Laporta. You're behind Gibbs. You're probably behind Montgomery, right? So you're still the fifth option on a very good offense. I think it limits his upside, but I still do see all of the upside that I saw before in him. It just has not come together yet. So this is kind of make it or break it for Jameson, though, because if with all of this buzz he underperforms, people are going to sink him like a stone next season.
Last quick conversation in this tier that I want to hit on is the Colts receivers, because they're back-to-back in ECR. You guys have them flipped. Fitz, you are higher on Josh Downs. And Bogman, you are higher on Adonai Mitchell. So Fitz, make the case for Downs over Mitchell.
I'm probably going to flip that after the buzz was pretty good on Adonai Mitchell coming out of Colts offseason OTAs. Like those practices apparently, like Adonai Mitchell really impressed. So I think I'm probably going to have him higher when I update these rankings next. No real case to be made, but I do worry a little bit about sort of all the Colts receivers. I think this is going to be a really run-heavy offense, like one of the 3 or 4 heaviest in the league, I would imagine, this year with Anthony Richardson at QB.
Obviously, Bogman, you still agree on Mitchell being higher?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously a Texas guy, going to stick up for my guy here. But also, like Josh Downs, I think has a decent floor. I was higher on him coming out last year than a lot of guys. I just think it's tough. I think what Fitz said is right. They're going to run the ball a ton. Josh Downs is probably easily third at best in terms of the pecking order behind Pittman and Taylor. So at best, you're third. You're probably closer to fourth because Mitchell is probably going to be more of a volume guy than Josh Downs. I think Josh Downs is going to have some huge games, but he's got to earn those targets. He's got to do it pretty quick before Mitchell does if he wants to have a big monster type season. So I don't know. There's a lot of gray there in the Colts, but I'll take the guy with the size over Josh Downs.
We'll wrap up with some quick thoughts on tier 7. I'm not going to read through every name because it's a very large tier. The first 5 names is to give people a sense of where we are. Troy Franklin, Roman Wilson, Jermaine Burton, Jalen Polk, Jacoby Myers. 4 of those guys are rookies, of course. In this tier, Bogman, is there anybody that stands out to you that you think is, too low and we should be considering in a tier or 2 higher?
Yeah, I think there's opportunity for a lot of these guys, especially young guys like Troy Franklin. What's going on with Courtland Sutton, right? Is Courtland Sutton even going to be on the Broncos by the time the season starts? Troy Franklin might be a number 1 wideout, and he has his college quarterback, Bo Nix, in there with him already. So the learning curve should be a little bit less. Jalen Polk and Javon Baker both have a shot to jump up, right? So I think those guys, just with the opportunity, have a chance to move up. Quentin Johnston, Josh Palmer, I have Ladd higher. So I put all these guys a little bit higher because the opportunity is there for all of them. I think Ladd is the guy to take it, right? But Palmer's there. Quentin Johnston, I mean, you got to catch the football. It's kind of like that scene in Apollo 13 when he said, well, then let's get rid of the parachutes. And he's like, well, if the parachutes don't go off, what's the point? That's kind of like, this guy can't catch. He could do everything else, but he can't catch. If he can't catch, the parachutes aren't going off. What's the point? So hopefully he changes that, but the opportunity is there. So a couple of these guys at the end, I just like, because they do have an opportunity to go and earn it. So those are the guys that I like in terms of being able to go and maybe wrangle a job and high target share this year.
Fitz, who stands out to you in this tier?
It's funny that Boggs and I are 22 spots apart on Roman Wilson. I mean, you put a guy in an Arthur Smith offense, and it's like Bogman is a vampire, and the guy in the Arthur Smith offense has got a necklace of garlic cloves. It's just unbelievable. So, yeah, I mean, like, Bogman wants no part of that. But I like Roman Wilson, and he could be the wide receiver, too, right away as a rookie year. Like, the competition, it's, a lot of has-beens and never gonna be.
Hey, listen, I'll raise Roman Wilson up a lot when we start getting points for pancake blocks because he's going to be out there rolling some of those wide receivers. He loves to block.
Fitz, go ahead.
I was going to bring up Dontavian Wicks, too. I think like the abundance of Green Bay Packer wide receivers is scaring people off of all of them. Like, I mean, in the previous tier, I'm 14 spots above consensus on Christian Watson. Apparently no one wants a 6'4" guy with sub 4.4 speed who scored 8 touchdowns in 4 games as a rookie. But yeah, and I realize he had the hamstring issues, but Dontavian Wicks, who seems like he's going to be the wide receiver 4. I don't care. I don't really mind that it would probably take an injury or two to get him consistent targets in the Green Bay offense. I mean, when Matt LaFleur says that Dontavian Wicks reminds him of Devontae Adams, that interests me a great deal. And the fact that Wicks was really good as a rookie. So, and right now his ECR is what? Wide receiver 64? That just seems egregiously low.
Yeah.
Oh, and Khalil Shakir, what's he doing with an ECR of wide receiver 71? A guy who could conceivably lead the Bills in receiving this year?
This is tough. There's so many good wide receivers, man. Like, it is tough to kind of make sure everyone is in that. Like, you want these guys to be a top 60 to be a wide receiver 5, but there's so many at the end that you want to take a shot on. It is really dealer's choice. For sure.
That actually kind of leads me into the last question I wanted to ask both of you guys, which is in the process of running through these tiers and establishing your own rankings, was there anything illuminating to you about what you want your wide receiver strategy in Dynasty to be? Because it's become obviously the most popular thing to do in startup leagues and in any Dynasty league is to prioritize wide receiver because they have longer shelf lives than running backs. And it's just a position that's very important. So in the process of kind of sitting down and looking through your rankings and seeing what the tiers are, does that kind of change how you want to approach it? Do you want to come away with X number of receivers in the first Y number of rounds? Are you kind of letting the value come to you because it's such a deep position? Bogman, how are you approaching this position in startup drafts and trades?
Yeah, in the past, I definitely have been hey, look, there's so many good wide receivers. Just wait to take them, get those, heavy usage running backs, or if you're in a super flex, take those QBs first, to make sure you have those spots, because not only is there good players available in the draft, there's usually some wide receivers on the wire too. It's not like that anymore, right? It's an arms race. So maybe you can use that strategy at the end. Like I said, for your bench wide receivers, you can take upside and there's still going to be floor guys because people are passing them. The end is strong, but you have to keep pace with the rest of the league at wide receiver because it's an arms race. In baseball, we say power is an arms race. You have to stay up because everybody can hit homers now. In football, you have to have 3 good starting wideouts. If you're starting 3, you need a 4th for that flex spot because there are better wide receiver options than there are running back options in the league now. So you have to have 4 really good ones, whatever way you prioritize it. You can wait on the bench, but the starters still have to be really good.
Fitz, same question.
Every dynasty league I'm in, you have to start 3 wide receivers, and it's a PPR format, and you can flex additional wide receivers. I always want to prioritize that position. And like in super flex leagues, quarterback is extremely important too, but I feel like wide receivers are the lifeblood of most dynasty teams.
All right, we will get out of there on that. Thank you, everybody, for sticking with us for all of those receivers we ran through, and also for welcoming me back in the comments. I'm sure they will be very happy to see me return. He said sarcastic.
We love it. We love that Worm's back. All the sarcasm aside, glad to have you back and doing those reads so I don't have to, Worm. Love you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Welcome back.
All right, for Bogman and Fitz, I'm Ryan Wormeli, and we'll see everybody again next week.